The silence in our house didn't just hang in the air. It felt like a physical weight, pressing against my chest every time I walked through the front door. My name is Elias Thorne, and for the last 7 years, I thought I was building a life with the woman of my dreams, Sarah. I'd spent the better part of a decade hunched over a workbench in our garage in a quiet, rain-slick suburb of Seattle, pouring every cent, every hour of sleep, and every ounce of my soul into a specialized molecular filtration patent. It was a grueling, lonely process. Most nights, the only sound I heard was the hum of the cooling fans and the rhythmic dripping of the condensation from my prototypes. I was chasing a ghost, or so Sarah told me. She would stand in the doorway, the light from the kitchen casting a long, judgmental shadow over my equipment, here her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She didn't see a man trying to change the world. She saw a man who wasn't buying her a new SUV or taking her to Aspen for the winter. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. I wanted that success for us. I truly did. I imagined the day I'd lead her into a new home, one where the roof didn't leak and the heater actually worked. But the gap between her expectations and our reality was becoming a canyon I couldn't bridge. When Sarah and I first married, things were different. We were young, idealistic, and deeply in love. I had a stable job as a junior engineer, and she was starting her career in marketing. And we bought this house with a 30-year mortgage and big dreams. But 3 years in, I realized that the technology for industrial water purification was fundamentally broken. I saw a way to fix it, a way to use graphene-based membranes to strip toxins from water at a molecular level. I quit my job to focus on the patent. That was the first crack in our foundation. We'll be fine for a year, I told her. I have the savings and the preliminary tests are incredible. 1 year turned into three. Three turned into 7. As the savings evaporated, so did Sarah's patience. She began to see my passion as a mental illness. She began to see our home as a prison. By 2024, our conversations were limited to, did you pay the electric bill? And when are you going to get a real job? I was working 30 hours a week as a freelance consultant just to keep the lab running. I was exhausted, depleted, and losing hope. But I knew I was close. The molecular bonding of the polymer was finally stabilizing. I just needed one more breakthrough. In the spring of 2026, the atmosphere in the house changed from hostile to hauntingly quiet. Sarah stopped complaining. She stopped checking my bank statements. In a way, that was worse. The anger was replaced by a chilling indifference. She started networking more, coming home at 10 p.m. with the smell of expensive gin on her breath and a glow in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. And then there was the car. A sleek, silver BMW 5 Series began appearing at the end of our cul-de-sac. It was always there at 2 p.m. when I took my midday break, and it was there at 11 p.m. when Sarah got home from work. One afternoon, I walked to the end of the driveway to get the mail and saw Sarah stepping out of the passenger side. A man followed her out. He was polished, tanned, and wearing a suit that cost more than my entire lab setup. He kissed her, not a peck on the cheek, but a long, possessive kiss right in front of the house I was breaking my back to keep. I found out later his name was Julian Vance. He wasn't just a lover, he was a high-stakes divorce attorney known for aggressive asset protection. Sarah wasn't just having an affair, she was being coached on how to strip me of whatever dignity I had left before she made her exit. April 2nd. And I'll never forget the date. I was sitting in my garage staring at a laptop screen that showed a single notification, patent number 9,822,104, status approved. An hour later, my phone rang. It was an executive from Aquagen Global. They didn't want to license the tech. They wanted to buy it outright. Mr. Thorne, the executive said, his voice crackling with professional excitement. We've reviewed the blind data from your third-party auditors. Your system is the holy grail of desalinization. We are prepared to offer you an outright acquisition, $55 million, cash. We can close the deal within the month. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by rusted tools and plastic tubing, and I wept. I thought of Sarah. I thought of how I could finally give her the life she wanted. I thought we were saved. I walked into the house, my heart hammering against my ribs, ready to scream the news. But as I passed the hallway, I saw her phone sitting on the charger. A message popped up on the lock screen. Julian, everything is ready. The papers are drafted. You'll be free soon, my love. I didn't tell her. I couldn't. The betrayal felt like a cold blade in my gut. For 2 days, I went about my business as a failing inventor. While in secret, I was coordinating with Marcus, my old law school roommate who now handled billion-dollar tech acquisitions. Elias, Marcus told me over an encrypted line, if she serves you before the sale is finalized, and if she waives interest in your company to avoid your debts, which a shark like Julian will surely advise her to do, the money is yours. But you have to stay quiet. Not a word, not a smile. On April 9th, I walked into the kitchen. Sarah was sitting at the breakfast nook. The lights were low and a thick manila envelope sat in the center of the table. I'm done, Elias, she said, not even looking up. I can't wait for your big break anymore. I've already moved my things. These are the divorce papers. Sign them and we can go our separate ways quietly. I picked up the papers. My eyes skipped past the standard legal jargon and landed on a specific section Julian had drafted. It was a full waiver of business interests. Because they assumed I was broke and buried in debt, Julian had advised her to waive any right to my failed business ventures to ensure I couldn't claim she was responsible for my lab debts. You're sure about this? I asked, playing the part of the defeated husband. You don't want to wait just a little longer? I have a good feeling about the next round of testing. Sarah let out a harsh, jagged laugh. Elias, I've heard about your good feelings for 7 years. I'm 34. I want to live in a penthouse, not a garage. Julian, my lawyer, has already found me a place. Just sign the paper so I can finally be happy. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you were sitting across from your spouse and knew you were about to be worth $55 million, could you keep a straight face while they called you a failure? The next 3 weeks were a surreal slow-motion nightmare. I lived in the house alone, surrounded by the echoes of her absence. I watched through the doorbell camera as Julian's BMW came by to pick up the last of her things. I saw them kissing on my lawn, and Julian laughing as he tossed a box of my old college textbooks into the trunk. Meanwhile, Marcus and I were finalizing the deal with Aquagen. We moved the closing date to 3 days after the court was scheduled to finalize the no-fault, uncontested divorce. I had to maintain the facade. I stopped shaving. I wore my oldest, most stained work clothes. I wanted them to believe I was a man on the brink of total collapse. I even had a final dinner with Sarah at a cheap diner to discuss the logistics. She spent the entire time on her phone, texting Julian, occasionally looking up to remind me that she was moving on to bigger and better things. She had no idea that bigger and better was sitting right across from her, hidden in a plain white t-shirt. The day of the final signing arrived, and we met at Julian's office, a glass and steel monolith overlooking Elliott Bay. Julian sat at the head of the table, looking smug in a charcoal suit that cost 5 figures. Sarah sat next to him, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Elias, Julian began, sliding a pen toward me. We've made this as painless as possible. Sarah's even willing to let you keep the old sedan. She's moving on to a penthouse in the city. Let's just sign and get this over with. I looked at Sarah. Last chance, Sarah. Is this really what you want? To walk away from everything we built? We didn't build anything, Elias, she snapped. You built a garage full of junk. I built a career. Sign the paper. I signed. The notary stamped the document. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket with a flourish. Well, that's that. And best of luck with the water filters, Elias. Maybe you can find a job at a car wash. As they turned to leave, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank. The wire transfer had cleared. $55 million. Actually, Julian, I said, my voice echoing in the sterile room, I have a question about the pending patents clause. You were very insistent on that, weren't you? Julian paused, his hand on the door handle. It was for your benefit, Elias, to ensure Sarah wasn't tied to your failures. Why? Because, I said, pulling out a tablet and turning it toward them. The failures were just acquired by Aquagen Global. for $55 million. Cash. The silence that hit the room was deafening. I watched Sarah's eyes scan the screen. I watched the moment the number registered in her brain. Her mouth opened. But no sound came out. She looked at the paper, then at me, then at Julian. Elias, she finally choked out. What? What is this? This has to be a joke. It's not a joke, Sarah, Marcus said, stepping forward from the back of the room. And because you signed that waiver 10 minutes ago, specifically stating you wanted no interest in Elias's business ventures to avoid his debts, you are now legally barred from claiming a single cent of this acquisition. Julian, I have to say, your drafting was impeccable. You've successfully protected Sarah from ever touching $27.5 million. Sarah turned on Julian, her face contorted with rage. You said he was broke. You said we had to hurry before he dragged me down. The conference room turned into a battlefield. Julian was screaming at Marcus about lack of disclosure, but Marcus was ready. He pulled out a series of emails I had sent Sarah over the last 6 months. Emails inviting her to the lab, emails asking her to sit down and discuss the business growth, emails she had replied to with, I don't care about your stupid projects, Elias. Talk to my lawyer. We disclosed the existence of the business, Marcus said calmly. Your client refused to participate in discovery. She waived her right to an audit. You were so busy trying to rush the divorce so you two could go public with your affair that you forgot to do your job, Julian. Sarah was on the floor now, literally sobbing. Elias, honey, I didn't mean it. We can fix this. We're still a team. No, Sarah, I said, standing up. We were never a team. You were just waiting for a better offer. And you finally found one. I hope the penthouse is worth it. The weeks following the reveal were a circus. Sarah's sister's house turned out to be Julian's penthouse. But that didn't last long. Once the realization set in that Julian's mistake had cost her nearly $30 million, their perfect romance fell apart in a spectacular explosion of blame and resentment. My phone was a war zone of voicemails. Sarah's family, who hadn't spoken to me in years, were suddenly calling to check in. Her friends were sending me messages on social media, telling me how brave I was. I blocked them all. Julian's firm ended up firing him after the details of the botched waiver became public. It turns out losing a client $27.5 million because you were too busy sleeping with her to do a basic asset search isn't great for your career. When he was last seen handling low-level traffic court cases in a strip mall. I sold the house in Seattle. I couldn't stand the smell of the garage anymore. It reminded me of the years I spent being lonely while someone I loved was a few feet away, wishing I was someone else. I bought a house on the coast of Oregon, a place where the cliffs meet the Pacific. I spent a year just traveling. I went to Japan, to Iceland, to the Swiss Alps. I realized that money doesn't make you happy, but it does give you the space to find out what does. I found out I like hiking. I like photography. I like waking up and not feeling like a burden. I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have shared the money with her? Or was her betrayal too deep? Eventually, I agreed to meet Sarah one last time. We met at a small cafe in Portland. She looked haggard. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by an old sweater. She told me she was struggling to pay rent. She told me Julian had sued her for emotional distress. I pulled a checkbook out of my pocket. Her eyes lit up with a spark of greed that she couldn't quite hide. I wrote out a check and handed it to her. She looked at it, and her face fell. $10,000, she whispered. That's for the credit card debt I took on in the divorce, I said. Consider it a refund. Now we're even. Don't call me again, Sarah. I've already changed my number. Today, my patent is used in over 40 industrial sites across the globe. When we're working on a home-based version that could provide clean water to families in developing nations for less than $5 a year. That's my family now. The people whose lives are actually being changed by the work I did in that cold garage. I've met a woman here in Oregon named Maya. She's an artist. She doesn't care about the $55 million. She cares about the way I look at the sunset. When I told her about Sarah, she just held my hand and said, I'm glad you didn't give up on your dream, even when the person who should have loved you most did. I recently saw a social media post of Sarah's. She was at a cheap local bar, looking tired. The caption was about tough times revealing true friends. It's funny how the narrative changes when you're the one who lost the bet. She bet against me, and for the first time in my life, I'm glad I was the one who won. I realized that the family secrets and revenge I lived through wasn't about hurting her. The best revenge wasn't the money. It was the fact that I am happy, I am successful, and I am free from the toxicity of a woman who valued a BMW over soulmate. If you're out there working on your own patent and the people you love are calling you a failure, listen to me. Their lack of vision is not your limitation. The world is full of Sarahs and Julians who only see what you have today, not what you're building for tomorrow. Success is the ultimate vindication. If you were in Elias's shoes, facing a betrayal like this right at the moment of your greatest success, would you have shared the money or walked away clean? Share your thoughts in the comments. As the sun sets over the Pacific, I realized that the 7 years in the garage weren't wasted. They were a test of my technology and a test of my character. I passed both. Thank you so much for joining me today on Family Secrets and Revenge. This story is a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of knowing your own worth, even when those around you can't see it. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us continue to share these powerful narratives of justice and transformation. Let us know your overall thoughts based on my story in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay strong and keep building your future.